Everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Extra Edge. For those of you who've tuned in previously, you'll know that our focus is always on how to achieve the best in performance and operational excellence across the offshore energy industry. We're now drilling down, pardon the pun, a bit further, and we're going to talk about performance and Ops X in terms of production excellence and how we can integrate the technical expertise within Exceed with the cultural knowledge and understanding that we have. So our guests today bring tangible experience in exactly this, and the four of them combine to address the cultural and technical aspects of the journey for the offshore industry ahead. So let me introduce them to you. First off, we have our regular contributors, Murray McMillan, Operations Excellence Expert, and Tim Wiggum, Head of Performance Improvement for Exceed. And joining them today, we have Mark Cullen, who is Exceed's Head of Subsurface, and his colleague, Production Technology Manager, Steve Hayhurst. So welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Hi.
I would usually go round you all one by one, but I think since there's four of us today, we'll keep it to a collective hello. So I think what we'll do is, first off, just to kind of get the ball rolling, it's probably a good idea to speak to you first, Murray, and just get an idea around sort of current operational context. You know, you've spoken about performance and operations excellence previously. We've spoken about that across the offshore industry, as we've said. But what are the specific challenges that you're seeing and hearing about right now that you think are going to affect production optimization over the next 12 months or so?
Okay, well, hello again, Rachel. Yeah, actually seen quite a big change. I think when we did one of these early part of last year, the message from everybody was costs. Everybody was so focused on costs, headcount, and actually probably survival for the bulk of last year. I would say since the tail end of last year and certainly this year, I'm seeing a lot more focus back on production, which is good. A lot more focus on that, and obviously the whole energy transition. Pretty much every conversation we have with operators just now, net zero's in there somewhere, which is actually really good because it's so intrinsically tied to production performance anyway. You know, there's actually some really good wins in your emissions and your net zero linked to production. But yeah, for my side, from the Ops Excellence, with my production hat on as well, really encouraging to see production's absolutely back on the map. And I think there's a big need there to go back to where we were a couple of years ago and focus back on making it as efficient as possible.
Okay, so we'll speak to the technical guys in a moment or two. That's Mark and Steve, just teeing you up. But from your perspective, Murray, looking at sort of the culture within operations excellence, do you think that the past year has had an impact on that? Is it going to be difficult to get teams up and running and performing at their optimum levels?
I don't think it'll be difficult. I think actually one of the big benefits, and this is something that's come up with Tim in previous conversations, I think working like this, working remotely, working virtually, is actually a lot more natural now than it was even a year ago. So in a lot of ways, it's easier to touch base with the teams, get in touch with them. It's a lot more efficient from our side, being able to talk to offshore, talk to office staff virtually rather than having to come together. So that has been a big help. I think getting them engaged again, no. There was a bit of a pause last year. A lot of work was paused, a lot of big activity was paused. And the message I'm hearing is that's getting going again, actually because it has to. You can only delay these things so long. You have to get back on the treadmill, deliver your turnarounds, deliver your drilling campaigns, deliver everything else that's going on. So no, I think everybody's actually pretty keen to go. And certainly what I'm hearing is getting people engaged again and fired up. It shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, well that's really encouraging for all of us. And you know, I suppose Steve and Mark, I don't know who wants to go first. Maybe I'll address this to Mark in the first instance, bearing in mind what Murray has just said and how production does seem to be kicking off again. How does production optimization fit in here? What, from a technical perspective, are you seeing as the challenges? So not the cultural, you know, people have maybe been slightly out of the loop or focus on different things over the past 12 months, but from a technical perspective, what do you see as the challenges coming up in the next wee while?
I think from my perspective, there's quite a few different things.
and they're all driven by different objectives from the clients. You know, we're in a mature basin. Decommissioning is a big topic, has been a big topic for the last 5 years, primarily driven by the depreciation in the oil price, and therefore assets have become less economic. And that has driven an ambition to do the decommissioning safely, obviously, but at the lowest cost possible. And you know, when you start to think about these things and formalize solutions, the only way that you can do that is to continue production in some shape or form, so that you have a revenue stream that is going to pay for the decommissioning. So, you know, and that in itself, that continuation of production is part of the overall umbrella topic of production optimization. And so there's that piece. There's also the piece again, you know, in a downturn, the major capex projects that may have been on the horizon for operators in the North Sea tend to be either cancelled or put on the back burner, and the focus then is on OPEX, and the OPEX is always associated with production. So therefore, you know, the focus, because it moves back towards a more production focus, then things like production optimization become a very relevant piece of work that can be done in order to maximize the efficiency, the recovery factors associated with a particular asset, and ultimately sometimes prolong the longevity of an asset beyond what would have been otherwise considered, you know, the point where they cease production. So, you know, there are lots of benefits associated with it, not just the production optimization exercise itself. It has so many knock-on benefits that I think it really just depends on what the objective of the client is at a particular time.
So there's a number of objectives. So you said that depends on what the client is looking for. Like Steve, from your experience, what is the client looking for just now? Are people very keen to postpone decommissioning and approach this from is it produce to limit approach? I've not heard that expression before, but that's something that I've heard from you over the past few days. Is that the preference in your experience, or are people to defer decommissioning, or are people thinking more that decommissioning has been in the pipeline for long enough and it's, you know, it's time to really start addressing that?
I think there's a couple of things here. Is in terms of, you might say, an opportunity, you know, we're seeking to maximize economic recovery in line with, you know, guidelines from the authorities, if you like. So the operators have a responsibility to ensure that's happening. So, you know, where we can look to help is, you know, in a climate where we may have shed internal resource, is, you know, we can maybe contribute in helping some of that produce to limit process in terms of screening and ranking and prioritizing opportunity. Opportunities may come in different forms. It may be at the OPEX level, as Mark's talking about, you know, going after the low-hanging fruit, but, you know, a number of small pieces of low-hanging fruit start to really make a difference and make a contribution. The other area, I suppose, is repurposing assets to push out abandonment. And we've been fortunate to be involved in both carbon capture work in that nature, in terms of looking at the feasibility of that. And indeed, you know, legacy background has been in, you know, quite in-depth progression of those kind of opportunities, drilling test wells, for instance, to appraise aquifers for carbon storage. And another more recent twist is the move into hydrogen and the appetite to repurpose assets for hydrogen blend mix injection. So those interesting areas to be involved in, and another new horizon to cross in terms of learning and challenging, but it still comes back to, you know, the right systems, the right people, the right tools, and working with the client, making the best of his core personnel, but then, you know, complementing and topping up with what contribution we can bring in the area of facilitation combined with technical expertise, we think that is a good combination, and hopefully we'll continue to get traction in the market.
Okay, so the facilitation combined with the technical expertise, that's what's made my ears prick up there. That's obviously a combination of what all four of you do, basically. And I guess from my perspective, I understand how you have worked previously, Tim and Murray, in various circumstances, but not in the almost the transferability of skills. We're going from one type of activity, which we all know about, has been going on for quite a long time, into the energy transition, which, to be frank, we all knew about it for a while, but it seems to have been the past sort of 6 to 9 months that everybody is talking about it. You know, the major operators have now set out their ESG policies, and it is the buzzword on everybody's lips. So how do you go about, Steve and Mark, for example, getting Tim and Murray's expertise, and what do they need to do first, or alongside you with a team from the sort of facilitation perspective, before you can then, you know, look to optimize your technical capabilities?
Steve?
Okay, yeah. Well, we have internal to Exceed, and in parallel with our clients, you know, there's a mature stage gate type approach or process, and that naturally has structured coming together or meetings to join the stakeholders up at various points along the way. We either start by discussing or identifying what are the objectives. We need to do that as a collective, and we need to exchange. And what we've certainly seen is how well that can work in the virtual space if you have the right framework, the right facilitation, and the right skill sets being brought to bear. And so, you know, our ongoing operations and projects at the moment already, you know, are using that virtual meeting environment like we have now, and are already performing very well. And we're getting good feedback on the work that's been done in that fashion. And even I think myself going into some meetings, you think this could go on a while. Is have we bitten off too much? You know, just are we got this? Have we right sized it? And obviously there's some skill and learning as you go along. But I've been surprised how even quite large numbers can be, with the right structure and the right organization, we can get through, you know, quite a lot of material in an efficient way and come out the back end with it fully, you know, documented, fully reported, and a clear structure ahead. And so, yeah, I think we're already seeing the results of that, I would say. Tim, I mean, your thoughts on that? I think you probably got the best view in terms of, I come into some of these meetings, but you're of course supporting, you know, right the way across the work streams.
Yeah, what jumps out at me, Steve, listening to you there, and we've all had experience in supporting project teams, is the enrollment of the front line by the engineers and the designers, and that is always a challenge. So one of the significant initiatives that we support, Murray and myself, is the opportunity for the front line to have a voice. So we often call it a performance climate survey, or an operational kind of climate survey, where we give frontline operators the opportunity to voice their concerns, the potential blind spots, to the management team, to the engineering team, to the design team for the forthcoming operational plan, such that you really start to bring the team together and you start to bridge the potential gap or chasm between the strategic vision and then the frontline tactics. And that sort of readiness and engagement process is a crucial one for the people part of a project. We talk about people, process, and technology, as has already been touched upon. Bringing a team together to actually deliver against the objectives, which Steve mentioned, is easier said than done. And what Murray and I have found to be a very simple but very effective early process is one-on-ones with a representative sample of the frontline team to hear from them how we can deliver this based on their experience and what the concerns are, what the blind spots are, what equipment is concerning them, what interfaces have not worked well in the past. So that's something that jumps out at me, Steve, when we talk about linking strategy with tactics on these initiatives.
I couldn't agree with you more, Tim. And just the vocabulary that you were using there, there's nothing different between your approach and an engineered approach. You're talking about benchmarking essentially there, setting the baseline so that you can assess how well you've impacted. We do exactly the same thing. We might build a model of a well we've got the production from the well as it is now, but we might build a well model in order to assess the ambition, let's say, in terms of the production optimization or the increase in production. So, in general terms, the vocabulary that you're using is identical to what we would all use from an engineering perspective.
Yeah.
I was going to say it was beautifully put without the technical clutter mark. I thought language everybody can understand. I thought it was excellent. Yeah.
Well, it's required when I'm here, definitely. So, Steve, you were alluding to some work that you have been undertaking at the moment, looking at carbon capture, for example. But it would be quite interesting, I think, for the audience to get a flavour, without necessarily naming any names, we don't necessarily want to do that right now, but to give us an idea of what you guys have been working on from the production technology perspective, say, during the past year when things have been a little bit different, and what you think or what you know you have coming up in the pipeline.
I think the work scope has been varied. We have ongoing decommissioning work to support. At the same time, we've got new field development. Topical in new field development is single well, long distance tiebacks to existing assets and tying into third-party infrastructure and the need to work across that interface, work collaboratively, if you like. And that, is it's an opportunity and it's a challenge. Any interface is, and you obviously have to bring the right skill sets in order to, satisfy both parties, meet your objectives, but also, on board with the stakeholder. So, we've got first gas, we've got abandonment going on. And at the same time, there's larger new field developments, which we're starting work on, which is a complete new field, couple of drill centers, FPSO, that kind of project we're fortunate to be involved in. We've got another eye out to exploration wells, West Africa, deep water, support technically required there to deliver those, deep water challenging wells. It's a varied story. The engineering, I would say, is consistent. The processes are consistent. Trying to be as efficient as you can and offer best value. That, of course, is tailoring to what the customer is looking for. So you're listening to, I hope, satisfy that need of the customer. Each one will vary. Each one will have a slightly different circumstance.
Okay, so you've spoken there a little bit about deep water off West Africa. I'm assuming that the decommissioning work you're doing is based in the North Sea. I could be wrong, but I'm assuming it is. Where else, from a global perspective, are you guys focused on at the moment?
I guess from a global perspective, we have looked to the production optimization service where that might be best suited. And I guess where you have a high density of well stock, easily accessible, you can impact that very quickly and very easily. And the actual process of identifying opportunities with a particular asset, especially when there's a high density of well stock, tends to be more fruitful, let's say, and often easier as well, because the less wells you have in order to. One of the approaches that you might take is looking at the production KPIs associated with a particular well, and then looking for anomalies or outliers of that sort of benchmark or that KPI. Once you've identified those, then they become the wells that you might examine in a little bit more detail. So as you can imagine, if you have a higher density of well stock, then that becomes a very fruitful and easier exercise. So, from a global geographic perspective, I guess places like North Africa, the Middle East, certainly land rather than an offshore setting. But that doesn't preclude offshore, not by any stretch of the imagination. Indeed, within the last 5 years, for another client, I conducted a production optimization exercise on several North Sea assets. So, but it's just really optimizing or approaching clients where they can see the value. It's easily demonstrated. And they can, benefit from the gains quite quickly.
Okay. Tim, I know we spoke, or Murray mentioned earlier on about the virtual aspects of this, and Steve, in fact, has expressed his amazement at how efficient it can actually be to have a huge virtual process and come out with some real tangible results or guidelines from that. And I guess the fact that we're all comfortable with it virtually means that it's far more easy to look at doing this on a global basis from your point of view, certainly, whether it's a DWOP or what have you. You've been doing quite a lot of that, I think, haven't you, over the past 6 months? Do you feel that there's a feeling that this is a preferred way to go from now on? Or do you think it's something that will kind of fade away or not be quite so prevalent as we're allowed to travel further?
Yeah, good question. And I think it's like a lot of things as we emerge from lockdown over the next year or so. I think there will be a number of hybrids. So yeah, you talk about virtual workshops versus traditional in-person workshops. Another thing is working in the office versus working from home. I think what we'll see on the back of lockdown after this pandemic has eased is a realization that there are options. There are more options, there are more choices. We can still be effective working from home. We can still be effective having a virtual workshop, whereas before we used to fly everyone into one location to have that session. There are probably advantages and disadvantages to both, and indeed our feedback surveys at the end of virtual DWOPs, of which we've run a number over the last 6 months, have really informed us of that. And in fact, it's interesting, it's been around about 50%, 50-50 in terms of the feedback from attendees of the virtual DWOPs that we've done. 50% would prefer to get together in person because of some of the kind of belonging and connectivity, which is perhaps easier in person, face-to-face, and the sort of coffee table conversations that can happen more naturally in a face-to-face in-person setting. And then half have actually enjoyed not needing to travel, being able to see the screen better, some simple elements like that, and to participate from home in a virtual workshop versus having to travel halfway around the world in some cases at a fairly significant expense in order to participate in a workshop. So they've been very successful, the virtual workshops that we've done. I think one of the elements of our value proposition from a client point of view is our objective external expertise and the fact that we've supported numerous other clients with virtual workshops. So as operators are kind of getting going with perhaps some of their postponed work scopes from when COVID hit last year, and they kind of pushed their schedules out to the right where they could for various work scopes, we're finding that they're reaching out to us based on our experience supporting a number of clients with these virtual workshops, because even though online video collaboration has become more normal, since COVID, facilitating and running a successful workshop is not necessarily something that teams are as familiar with. They know how to use the platform, but to successfully get groups to engage and produce actions which will help set us up for success, somewhat less so. So it's been a steep learning curve for us. We've been grateful for the opportunities, and we now enjoy bringing some of those learnings to other clients to show just how effective these virtual platforms can be. Everything from virtual icebreakers through to virtual group collaboration, going through phases of the program, or even looking at technology and doing a risk assessment online. It's an evolving process to find different ways of doing that, even using kind of physical visuals, as Steve and I have done in the past for clients in-person workshops. There are ways and means of doing those quite effectively in a virtual setting. So the pace of change with some of these virtual platforms and the ability to integrate different camera angles on what you're doing as a team is quite impressive. It's quite difficult to keep up, but it's been an area where clients have had to engage through force of circumstance.
Let's talk now a little bit more about the sort of the human and behavioural side. We've heard from Steve and Mark about the technical side of production optimization, but Murray, how do you fit into that particular jigsaw?
I think one of the nice things is it's quite a large jigsaw, so typically clients need quite a broad range of skills brought in. So obviously, Mark and Steve have already talked about some of the very specialist skills they have in that production optimization side. But there is also the softer skills that Tim and I bring. We've seen from other parts of the wider offering, and I think you never want to underestimate the engagement. Tim's mentioned that already, getting the guys engaged. My experience in assets internationally and in the UK, typically the people in the assets are actually very passionate and care a lot about getting more production, better production. Sometimes there's frustration there. Tim mentioned the climate survey, so one of the things that tackles is why are they feeling frustrated? But there's usually a lot of passion and desire to actually improve production and extend the life of their assets. So I think the behavioural side in there is really important, and it also ties in again with what Mark and Steve have both said around the optimization and improving how assets run. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit in just the day-to-day stuff, because reality on older assets, you get a bit of mission creep, but you get a bit of custom and practice, things that are not necessarily the best way to operate a well or operate the plant. And then that's some of these softer skills come in there to try and improve some of that alongside the very specific technical aspects that the other guys bring into this. So I think one of the nice things from an Exceed point of view is it's the whole holistic approach to this. It's not just one part of the jigsaw, it's the entire jigsaw.
And in previous lifetimes, Mark and Steve, I would imagine that you have run projects without that sort of behavioural, cultural piece being done first and then alongside what you're doing. How, from your point of view, what is the difference? Are there a lot of frustrations attached to a project that doesn't have that kind of groundwork laid in the first place?
I think there, some of the things there, well, all of what Murray said there resonates with me, but it prompts memories. And when I think of some of the, the best examples I've seen is there's anxiety, obviously there's concern, particularly right now. What's so important, I think, is when the new assets are, should we say, change hands, and we the question is what's going to happen. Is there's a consistent message from the leadership at the top that simply repeats, we're here to invest, and we are going to see some change. We're going to manage through the change, but investment is being made. That's the good news story, if you like, when assets are taken over. And I think it's important to have a range of targets that both enable some low-hanging fruit to get people able to see, the benefits of the investment, as well as the longer-term, higher spend capex. And that messaging, I think, is very important from the top, so that people feel they can get behind it. It's happening. It's not a fashion for this month that's going to change the following month, and that then the campaign of culture and making a difference can gain momentum, and you get the full benefits in that way. So I think rather than maybe talk about when it hasn't gone so well, I think it's important you get that message, you get the people, you get the culture and the behaviors right, as well as doing the technical work. If you don't put it all together, and I suppose what Murray's talked about it, but the on-offshore comms and communication, it's not just the office feeling good, it's everybody in the team, the people who are actually carrying out the tasks and doing the work and making the difference in the field. That it's everybody has got to be onboarded to this. So communication and facilitating that communication, what is communication? It's exchange, isn't it? It's facilitating that two-way exchange. And that's a key part of the success for me.
It has to be sustainable as well. And I think that's the key. Because as a group here, we can't do all this good work and then walk away and leave it, because you have to embed the culture. Everybody needs to be on board, from the senior management right down to the guy that's opening and closing a valve on the plant. And more often than not, that kind of culture will cascade down rather than be pushed uphill. So, it's very important to have engagement not only with the people that are actually doing the work, but with the management both offshore and onshore.
So there's sort of a maintenance element to it as well, I guess. Murray, is that the right kind of expression to use? It's not just you go in there, get it all set up, get people thinking along the right track. You've then got to make sure that is being perpetuated.
I think just a little example on that, Rachel, and a funny feeling we've maybe used it in a previous example. I think it's building on what Mark says. If you can get that culture across the whole asset, everybody has a part to play. And I think everybody believing they have a part to play is so powerful. We used the water injection example in a previous session, where we had a big campaign to dramatically improve water injection in a particular asset. And right from the moment you arrived on the asset, everybody knew about it. They knew what we were trying to do, and they knew why. And ultimately, it was very successful. It was a great campaign. And as it came to an end, we obviously move on to something else. The field manager was offshore just after that, just doing his usual regular visit. He was a good field manager from that point of view. And he was challenged by a guy on the platform as to why we didn't talk about water injection anymore. Why was it not important? Why were we not pushing it so hard? And the guy that challenged them was a chef. So this had been put right through the platform. The chef could not influence water injection on a day-to-day basis. He could feed the guys that were, but he couldn't actually influence it. But he was so bought into what we were trying to do. And I think it's getting that message across that regardless of your role in the asset, you actually, in the larger scheme, are contributing to it. And that, as Mark says, that's part of your sustainability. If everybody's bought into that and driving it. And I think we see more and more of that in the North Sea at the moment, where it feels like not a week goes by when there's not another merger and acquisition. And these are typically assets that the super majors are maybe moving on. They've now got a new chance of life. So if the people out there can believe there's another 5 or 10 years of life in it, they're your future. They're the ones that will come up with the good ideas and will drive this forward. And as well as the very technical optimization we're talking about, they'll be bought into the day-to-day, keeping it alive and sustainable.
And if I can just build on what Murray and Mark have said there, there's research to back up those key cultural leading indicators. A book that I recently read called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. He spent 4 years researching 8 high-performance project teams or companies around the world, including the likes of Pixar, the All Blacks, and others. And the 3 key things that he found in order to achieve a high-purpose, high-performance environment was 1, psychological safety. So you talk about a chef feeling psychologically safe enough to challenge the field manager on his walk around, and to feel that his job is not in jeopardy because he's perhaps confronting someone who could to get rid of him. So psychological safety is key. The second one is vulnerability. And vulnerability is very much where you're looking for leaders to be vulnerable enough to say, you know what, I don't know the answer, so I'm looking for help. I'm really keen to hear from you guys and you girls about how we could do this job better. So vulnerability is key. The final one was purpose. So the purpose, the mission, the reason why we're doing this project, the reason why we're out here, what does everyone understand it? Is it up on boards? Is it regularly communicated, over communicated? There's a classic story that I've heard from a few really good drilling managers where they've said they've yet to be at a retrospect or a project review where it was mentioned that there was too much communication. So communicating the purpose, the why, the mission, the objectives for the project was key. So those three key things, psychological safety, vulnerability, and purpose, are sort of key cultural indicators to get right in order to be successful.
When it comes to product optimization, where does well integrity fit in there? What are the key challenges? What are you looking at just now in terms of well integrity projects, Steve?
Yeah, well, if we start, at the high level, then it is back to, systems, people, and processes. And, we have, been approached in the past for that support and service, discrete aspects of it, as well as, can you look at putting and supporting, the full system in place and seeing it through to getting it up and running. Why is it important? Obviously, you've got your, obligations. We've got the environmental, footprint, reducing our carbon footprint. So, we've got to make sure our wells, there's no unplanned releases. But it's not just about that. It's about the efficient management of that process and capturing it in an auditable fashion. So you sail through any audits. It's all done, if you like, single data entry, and we're not revisit. If you get your systems and processes right, then you need the minimum amount of people, and those people, the minimum amount of their time is used as you do integrity in a planned manner of campaigns, as opposed to unplanned. Unplanned, of course, equates to inefficient outages in your plants and negative impacts on your production. If assets change hands, there's a challenge there in terms of the handover to make sure that's done efficiently and you don't fall foul just as you inherit some assets. You haven't understood the problems you might be facing. So you maybe, there's a value that's inequality there in terms of what you think you've got and what you've actually got, and then you need to take stock of that. You also need to make sure that you're seen auditably to be doing the right thing, the right job, the right quality has been brought to bear. So we in the past have been involved in bringing in that assistance to make sure that that process goes smoothly and efficiently.
And presumably well integrity doesn't end with the energy transition. Obviously, if there's a repurpose process in place, then it's going to be as critical as it is at the moment.
Did you say the energy transition? Did you say?
Yeah.
Or the transition? Yeah, I suppose, yeah, you could deal with both, couldn't you? The asset transition, you don't show up and then just hand over and then walk away. It's a continuous process of support and improvement. So standards may change, and we may repurpose assets, and therefore the demand on those assets may change. So we may have to reevaluate things like, pressures, temperatures, conditions that can impact in turn the risk to integrity of those well stock or plants. So you have to maintain that system. If we're talking about repurposing, we go back to maybe the hydrogen project I mentioned earlier. There, for instance, we say, well, what do we need for hydrogen? What's important in terms of integrity? What does the use of a hydrogen blend mean in terms of materials or challenges? What are the new load cases you might be introducing? So repurposing, that feeds back into, okay, what is the design of the system? What does it look like? What have we got? Where do we need to upgrade? So yeah, it's an ongoing process.
And it never ends.
They
And
never
it's all
end.
encompassing.
That could either be a positive or a slightly pessimistic view.
It is. I mean, it's not just about the wells, it's about the asset as a whole. And I don't just mean the bits of metal either. I was speaking to a chap who worked for ConocoPhillips in Canada a while back. And ConocoPhillips actually consider the asset, including the overburden of the reservoir, when it comes to asset integrity. So, you know, they're looking for leak paths through the rock, not just the wells and the pipelines and the process. They're actually looking at the whole environment, the whole ecosystem of the asset and the integrity of that asset, because integrity, or the well integrity, obviously there's the HSE angle, there's the environmental angle, and in terms of hydrocarbon release. So, you know, it's not just the mechanical parts that have the potential to fail. The rocks themselves can fail.
So, Mark, just to round up this session, you had pick on you first. This is pretty much the start of a new year. Some things have changed from 2020, other things unfortunately are still the same at the moment. But from a production technology, from your own work perspective, what do you see as the real sort of opportunities or exciting elements ahead of you?
Well, it's heartening to see that the oil price is on the up. I think that's the first. I think today it was up at $67 a barrel, which is back to where it was pre-COVID. So hopefully we're back on the road to recovery, and I'm looking forward to COVID and the impact of COVID diminishing to the point where we can all get back into the workplace, maybe not as often as we did before, but you know, that interaction is important, I think, for everybody's mental health these days. In terms of the industry, again, although I work in the oil industry, I'm heartened to see the move towards renewables, and a lot of companies re-imaging themselves as energy companies rather than pure exploration and production companies. And I think, you know, the investments that are being made in renewable power generation, the types of projects that Steve were talking about earlier on, you know, the hydrogen generation storage projects. It's really heartening to see those coming over the horizon now. So yeah, I think there's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, it truly is a transitional stage that we're going through, I guess, at the moment for lots of different reasons. Mr. McMillan, what's your thought about 2021?
Looking forward to getting released from lockdown for a start. That'll be really nice. I guess probably two for me, two top ones. One, from the production side, really enjoying the ongoing conversations just now around net zero, because it's actually fairly easy to get your hands around and make a difference quite quickly. So that's always satisfying. It's a good thing to do. And I think, as we've heard throughout this podcast, the integration of the skills and the expertise we have just on the screen just now, you know, more opportunities to make better use of that will be great. And I think we've heard from all of us that it's not just one or the other, it's the whole jigsaw was the term I used earlier on. Being able to use that jigsaw more effectively will actually be really satisfying and really enjoyable.
That's a nice positive note. Steve, how are you going to top that in terms of positivity?
Looking forward to seeing 3 kids go back to school. That's pretty, you know, that's going to be good.
Fair dues.
Looking forward to getting back into the office. I think it'd be looking forward, you know, to meeting clients face to face directly. That will be good, as well as, you know, suppliers and the team. You know, that will be good. I feel positive in the sense that we've got projects at the moment that are being executed, and some of those projects have been in the pipeline several years, and it's great. There's a sense of satisfaction when they get executed. So I'm looking to see those projects complete and, you know, job finished, if you like. And at the same time, yeah, I'm certainly enjoying the excitement of the new projects we're starting to come in, as I've spoke about already, some of the new technology or new style of project that we're seeing. So I think, yeah, certainly reasons to be positive. And yeah, again, I think the collective offering is something which we'll look forward to, virtually and then in person meeting clients and talking about, which I'm excited about that as well.
So it falls to you, Tim. Give us your final word. What's 2021 going to be like?
Well, following from Steve, it completely resonates what Steve said first, which is looking forward to getting 3 kids back to school. That will be a period of rejoicing in the Wigham household. We've managed to get 1 back, 2 to go. So completely echo Steve there, 100%. Yeah, I had the benefit of listening to Mark, Murray, and Steve while thinking about my answer to that, Rachel. It's an interesting one. I think we've been very blessed, most of us, in the UK, certainly on this call, compared to many in the world who have had a challenging time through this COVID period. So I'd like to think that as a human race, we've realized that we took a lot for granted, and that perhaps we were really in the rat race without being slightly more aware of other people and other problems. So I'm hoping that from a work perspective, getting back to work post-COVID, there will be renewed effort to empathize and to collaborate energetically and beneficially for all stakeholders and all parties. So I'm really looking forward to more uplifting collaboration and really looking to get more people involved, more people back to work, really being more caring and empathetic and getting projects going. So I'm just looking forward to that collaboration. And the other thing which has been mentioned by Murray already is the new tools and new learnings that we've had forced by the lockdown. So yes, a lot of them are digital, virtual collaboration, but I think there are other tools and there is equipment that has been developed through R&D at big organizations during this extended period, which I'm excited to see utilized for decommissioning, for production optimization, for the drilling of wells, and indeed for renewables. So yeah, on the people side, better collaboration, and then on the technical side, I'm looking forward to really engaging with and using the tools that have been invented and developed and evolved over this last year that we perhaps haven't seen yet. I'm looking forward to that as well.
Well, if I can put my tuppence worth in, what I am looking forward to over the next few months, you might find this hard to believe, is doing more of these podcasts, because if there's one thing that 2020 definitely accelerated, it's the whole notion of any company, looking to promote it itself and to educate its client base and its potential client base in this way. And I don't think we would ever have sat and been able to come up with a piece of solid marketing literature that got across the integration of Mark, Steve, Tim, Murray all within an hour. That's a really difficult thing to do. So from the perspective of being able to share how Exceed works as a whole, as a company, I see this as being a really, really useful platform. So I'm looking forward to the next one. I don't know who your next victims are going to be, Tim and Murray, but I'm really looking forward to it. And thank you very much, Mark and Steve, for your contribution today. It's been great to have a chat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks you everybody for listening, and of course, as ever, you can get in touch with any of these gentlemen directly via the Exceed website, exceed.com, and certainly the information will be available on LinkedIn and on our YouTube channel for the foreseeable future. Thanks now, bye-bye.